Good evening, friends. I'm Dr. Aajay Shah, bringing you another great weekday evening live. Tonight's topic actually is very dear to my heart, and tonight's guest is a perfect guest to talk about the topic which I admire and which I love so much. And tonight's topic is about longevity. Our tonight's guest is a longevity expert. He's actually a professor running a course in longevity. He's a great friend who actually walks the talk. And what I've seen him so far on the Facebook, I've never met him personally in live, but what I've seen on Facebook, he actually is 30 biological age while he himself is 60 years old. So that guest is Scott Fulton. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, AJ. It's great to be with you again. I always enjoy our talks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Same for me. So simple question, where do you live and what type of work you do now?
So I live in Delaware, so just west of Philadelphia. It's the marker most people can identify easier than a tiny little state of Delaware. Um, I, I wear many hats. My background is in engineering, but the couple of hats I wear are essentially it's all built around wellness in terms of proactively planning around both our home environment in terms of design work for people that we do online. And a lot of my time is around longevity education, obviously. And that's clearly where I have a lot of passion because there's so much opportunity that's untapped. So, and I know people like you have a great message to get out there every day.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think so my question to you is that please tell us that this mission to promote longevity and your commitment to spread all over the world, what age did you start thinking about longevity, living long, and what motivated to get back into this movement a few years ago?
Yeah, I think it honestly started for me really young. My grandmother had a tremendous impression on me. She was my grandfather died when I was very young. She was on a farm at the time, and there are a number of things that I didn't realize until much later in life that had been imprinted on me in terms of my values and the challenges with aging well. She was incredibly independent, and just I was always so proud of her. The and then I think I kind of kept this in my work in engineering was watching around accessibility and different challenges that people have at all ages in life. And as I started to look at my own parents and their friends, and I realized there were a number of very successful people who had some significant challenges when they came to retirement, and it wasn't resource constraint. They had all the money. They were really bright people. But it was surprising to me how many went off the rails. They were all set up for a great retirement, and the number that within just a few years of retirement really kind of succumbed to disease and even mortality. So that really drove me to ask some hard questions of, if they can't get it, how are the rest of us supposed to have a chance? These are kind of the bright people among us. And I think, and my background is a researcher, so it drove me into start doing a lot of research. And as I started to do that, it became apparent. I think that a lot has changed really just in the last 10 to 15 years that a lot of the public isn't aware of. And so it just continued to drive my passion around realizing I'd always been around the healthcare or the wellness space with a lot of my friends who were doctors. And I think it dawned on me that there was a place for me to play in this space that really people weren't doing. So for me, it's really all about practical solutions. Obviously genetics and things are part of my world, but I'm all about practical solutions that anybody can do that cost nothing.
Yeah, I think you said in such a right way that many of us, including a lot of successful people who are successful materially, they make a lot of money, they have a lot of good careers. Many of them are doctors, professors, engineers, a lot of successful business people. But when it comes down to health, many of them don't actually value health as a wealth. I think for them, earning money, having a big house, having an expensive car or a boat is more of a wealth than a health as a wealth. And I remember watching some of your YouTube videos that you started thinking about this issue even when you were 5, 7, 8 years old. And knowing your father's history, I remember listening to your story on a YouTube video that your father actually was very successful, but most of his retirement years were spent at doctor's office and at the hospitals. And I think I agree with you. I think when we retire, our number one goal is to be happy, healthy, and have great time with our family, with our kids, with our grandkids. And if we are not well physically, that cannot be achieved, and that has to start at a young age. So I think that brings an important question, and that question is always asked: that what is the difference between chronological age and biologic age? I think many of us, the clock keeps ticking on. We get a birthday every year. We keep getting old every year. But at the same time, biological clock does not have to advance every year. That can be slowed down, or that can be even stopped. So please explain the difference between chronologic age and biologic age.
Sure. So chronological age is the one we all refer to when someone says, "How old are you?" That's really, it's the calendar, how many birthday candles are on the cake at your birthday. So the terms around biological age is really reflecting how fast the cells in our body are aging. So it really speaks to, why do some people live to 90, 100, 110 even, and while others you can see by 70 that they are really declining fast. And what we're really seeing at play there is our biological aging factors. So when we talk about age-related diseases, really what we're talking about is biological change that's happening within our bodies. And so again, in the last 10 or 15 years or so, it's really become apparent to us that we now identify what are the biomarkers associated with biological aging, and what are the things that we can do to essentially protect ourselves, and to, just like we would think about anti-aging cream. Imagine if you could put that throughout your body. Well, you can, except it's not going to be a cream. It's just these, when we talk about lifestyle, we can think about anti-aging lifestyle, anti-aging cream, except it's, you may be able to take the wrinkles out of your face, but if that doesn't help your arteries, obviously, then you're not really achieving the goal that you would ultimately like to have.
Yeah, I think that's an important concept. And I always have felt that, as we get older chronologically, as we celebrate a lot of birthdays, I think it's in our hand how we can slow down the biologic clock, how we even can stop. And that actually can be even reversed. So that brings an important concept also, again, about the lifespan and health span. As we, over last 100 years, we are living longer. Unfortunately, last 3 years, we are actually living shorter, but at the same time, the health span over last what we have health over last 10 years of a life has significantly gone down. So please explain, what is the lifespan and what is the health span?
Sure. So lifespan, we can think about it in two ways. Is, what is the lifespan of a human? The longest human that we have documented to live got to 120, woman in France. So that's the demonstrated lifespan of a human. We kind of think that's maybe 125 might be the ultimate, but obviously very few people approach 120. There are some practical limitations around that, but that's the theoretical ultimate, and there's others working on trying to make that 200 and 500 years. But so that's lifespan. And then on a personal basis, it's really how long we live, right? In terms of our chronological age of how many years that we're on this earth. Our health span, however, isn't necessarily linked all that well to our lifespan. So we could take someone, let's take an example of someone who lives to 85. And we could say that was that individual's lifespan. Well, the part, particularly when I ask my students, how long would you like to live? And it's rare that they come up with a number. It's more often they come up with that emotional responses, as long as I stay healthy. And that's what we're talking about with health span, is really, how do we keep healthy for as much or for as long as our life? And so the idea, the example I offer to people, if I could guarantee you to have a 100th birthday party with your family and friends and have a great meal and have a great evening and go up to bed tired after a wonderful day, and pass away in your sleep. Is there anybody who wouldn't sign up for that scenario? And they all say, sure, that sounds like a good deal. 101 might be fun, but that's what we're talking about, is compressing the morbidity period, that period of managing disease where our ability to do our normal day-to-day functions just start to slip away from us, and we start to become more dependent on others. And I think what you raised up is we're seeing this growing phase of morbidity as we're seeing more and more early onset age-related diseases.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I mean, as a cardiologist, I see that a lot of patients, I see a lot of people I see after 65, 70, actually they are walking with a walker. Many of them have multiple surgeries, multiple procedures. By 80, 85, many of them are in a nursing home. They are not actually having an intact brain function. Many of them are crippled. And that's not, like you said, that's not the worth way of living life. I think so. Lifespan is important. At the same time, health span is important too. I think we want to increase both the lifespan and the health span. Fortunately, with all the technology, with all the emergency care, with all the stents and bypass, lifespan has gone up, and we can keep people live long. But are those people enjoying the life? Are they with their family? Are they walking? Are they going to their church? Are they going to their temple? I mean, I think that's the key thing. And then we will talk about, as we go in this live today, about the people in blue zones who not only live long, but they also have a good health span. So, that again brings a topic. And I think that's where I think it's called rectangular life curve, where you just live, 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 live. And then one day you just, like you said, die in the sleep. And that can be 90, 95, 100. And that's really possible with all the technology, with all the vaccines, with all the emergency care, and with all the knowledge we have with nutrition. That thing truly is possible. My sincere hope is that live with an expert like you will motivate people not just to increase the lifespan, but also the health span. That brings my next question. When we talk about lifespan, we have to talk about what kills us in America and in the Western world and in the world. So, in your opinion, what are the top killers for Americans?
Well, so I'm a big data guy. I do the work on what kills everybody, the things nobody wants, and that's what we've all been confronted with here in 2020. It's been the shocker. But for those like, and many physicians like you, this is a world we're familiar with, because that's what drives the important workforce. So without question, heart disease has and remains and will continue to be the number one killer of people. And when we talk about that, we're talking about early death as well. It's not simply the number who die, but those are early deaths followed closely by cancer. And cancer is in reality, it's all clustered together with a whole series of cancers. They are not all the same, and they have different mortality rates. But those are clearly the leading one and two. They make up about, I think, over 40% of the total deaths. And then everything else is a distant second, third, fourth, and fifth, kind of making up the top 10. Diabetes is in there. We hear a lot about it. Strokes in there, accidental deaths through all sorts of things. But generally, we look at all the leading causes of deaths are associated to a large degree with lifestyle, which means that they're influenceable deaths that are happening earlier than needed to. They certainly didn't make it anywhere near their lifespan. When we have that kind of like an 80% early death, says there's a lot of things we could be doing if only we knew what to do. And so that's really where I come at it, is to say, what are these big diseases? And if we look at ischemia, for example, in terms of in the world of heart disease, it's a great example. It's really not just heart disease, right? It's the same thing that's going to be typically root cause of a stroke. It's going to be tied in often with diabetes. So I look at the work that you do in terms of in the world of cardiology. There is nothing more important to me than managing heart disease. If you put that as your priority and say, how can I not have a heart attack? Because by not having a heart attack, I'm going to live longer and I'm going to remain healthier. And I can tell you that in the process of doing that, you're going to remove a whole lot of risks of other diseases along the way that you didn't even know that you were on the trajectory for.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I think heart disease, number one killer for last 100 years. And we would think that Americans, being the smartest people in the world, we would have learned from our own mistakes and lessons, but we have not learned. Heart disease, Canada, heart disease is #2 now. So I think we are actually still staying behind many of the Western countries. And I think that brings the topic that, Asselstyn clearly says that heart disease is like a paper tiger. It does not need to exist. I think it's completely reversible. It's completely preventable. And I think it's just going to require a lot of awareness, a lot of simple habits. And that's what we're going to learn from you. So let me ask you an important question. Heart disease, even though it's a #1 killer, from the DIN honest data, it's reversible. It's definitely preventable. So what are your views in terms of preventing heart disease and reversing heart disease?
So, so absolutely. So I'll just go back and pick up on your last point if I could as well. If we look at life expectancy in the US, we have been flat since 2010. We're one of the few countries in the world that have been flat. Most of the others have continued to grow. And so we've fallen behind, and it's not because there's anything unique here. It's really comes back to lifestyle. So the things that we would want to do around lifestyle would be #1, take a look at our diet. Everyone, if they're following you, they have to have heard a message around diet that would generally be moving towards a more or completely whole food, plant-based diet is going to be your safest bet. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect. Doesn't mean you have to be a vegan and run around waving your flag. There's just a lot of things that you can do that will help you in that regard. Movement every day and movement every hour. So, and that's a pretty simple thing to do. Just get out of the habit. If you're sitting for more than an hour, that's a signal to get up and move. And ideally, I try to encourage people that the recommended minimum is 150 minutes a week of exercise. I think that's the minimum. If your goal is the minimum, why not raise it, right? This is the only life you've got here right now, and why not invest in it? So I look at saying, let's do 30 minutes a day of real exercise. That's not a slow walk with the dog. That's a brisk walk. And if dog wants to brisk walk, or you like to get on a treadmill, or you like to go hiking and do some terrain, if you like to dance, it doesn't matter what it is. What matters is you find some things that you love and you have some variety. Those would be certainly 1 and 2. And these all come from our principles, which is actually, we have a term for it as MEDIC. So it's mind, environment, diet, exercise, and community. We can come back and talk about those. But I guess before we make any progress on those, is we have to have the right attitude. That's the mind piece. It's fine to listen to it and and get educated around it. But if we don't want to action against it, then it's really a lost opportunity for us. So there's things around the environment that can certainly keep us healthier from a heart standpoint around the things there. And I would say stress would be a big one. Stress is the difficult one, and we can talk a little bit more about that if you like. And then the other would be surround yourself with your tribe. And when we say your tribe, and that's when we talk about the blue zones, we're talking about supportive communities. The example I like to use is a smoker who wants to quit smoking. So we have 2 of them. One lives in a house of smokers, and the other is the only smoker in the house. Who's likely to have an easier time quitting smoking, right? The one who is in the tribe of non-smokers, because they're going to be supportive. So it does take, some looking around and some difficult choices for people. But again, they're important choices, important decisions, and they'll have a big impact. So those, high level would be some of the things I would start to think about, and say generally is like anyone's following you is continue to learn. The more we see that in longevity, one of the benchmarks for longevity is the people who continue to educate themselves, because you're going to keep current. You're not, that's what a lot of what I teach is unlearning old behavior and old habits. The living healthy is easy. That is honestly the easy part. The hard part is unlearning and undoing bad habits.
No, that's an excellent point. I think in terms of the heart disease, simple eating, whole food, plant-based, no oil diet, just having 30, 40 minutes of exercise, that's not too much to ask out of 24 hours. I mean, sometimes people watch mindlessly, Netflix and CNN and Fox for hours and hours. We are asking for 30 to 40 minutes of brisk walk. And I think having a tribe, having a community, having a social circle, And I think, again, clearly, I think if I ask any of my patients, how is their health, it reflects who their 5 friends are. I think we do what our friends do, and we do what our family does. And I think you made some excellent points that if you want to reverse and prevent heart disease, it's going to require multifactorial involvement, not just healthy eating. I think it's going to require all 6 pillars. And that brings to the next pillar, which is an important pillar that I think in longevity, in prevention of a lot of chronic disease, in terms of diabetes, in terms of heart disease, in terms of high blood pressure, sleep is very important. So what are your views on sleep?
Yeah, so I think sleep has become much more apparent in recent years. We always knew it was important, and not much has changed in our understanding. We have a better understanding what's happening, mapping in terms of the brain, uh, in terms of activities while we sleep. But sleep is one of those absolutely must have. It's largely a habit. So we've either learned to sleep well or we've learned to cheat ourselves from sleep and think that's okay. Welcome to do that, but you're playing against mighty, mighty difficult odds. And those would be the examples I would say with people who kind of took on too much stress during their career and then had all this wealth and all this opportunity that they never got to capitalize on. So there's, yes, so with sleep, there's elements of sleep of we need our REM sleep and we need our deep sleep. So we want to have, if we can get a goal of a couple hours of each of those, and there are devices, I've got one on right now. I wear a Garmin, it's a Forerunner 45. The wearable devices now spit out all kinds of information. I didn't get it for that at the time. I got it simply because I wanted something simple to manage my heart rate, because I had some heart concerns that I wanted to understand and be proactive around. And in the course of doing that, my device will tell me when in the morning what my sleep was like, how many hours of REM sleep I had, how much light sleep, and how much deep sleep. Is it perfect? Is it as good as going to a sleep lab? No, but it's, again, data that you can do proactively on your own, and you'll learn. And there's something we talk about in engineering particularly. As soon as we start to watch it, magically things start to improve because we see it and realize, oh, the human condition says, I think I can do a little bit better next time. And that's, so surround yourself with those metrics. That's why I love data, because we can use it to measure progress and we can catch ourselves when we're starting to go off rather than all of the mind games we play. So yeah, so sleep is, get a routine around that. Go to bed same time every night. Plan to get at least 7 hours, hopefully 8 if you can make that work. It may take you a while to get there, and if you're there already, that's great. And then the other with sleep is, it's not simply enough to be in bed, is we need to be having quality sleep. So you would know this obviously, but we look at things like atherosclerosis is tied with sleep apnea. So the fact that you're in bed sleeping for 8 hours isn't enough. We need to know what the quality of sleep is. These sort of things will give you some indication. Another one I love, and I just learned a few months ago and I've started to do, is mouth taping. So that's to help us learn to breathe through our nose. It sounds ridiculously scary to think about suffocating. I am shocked how much I enjoy it now, because literally I can feel that my sleep is better. And I mean, it's an easy thing to do. There's it's a 3M micropore is the tape that I use. So that will allow a little bit of air through, but and I can even manage it with all this hair up here. But so yeah, anything to get good sleep is going to help you in all aspects of life.
Wow, I agree. And I have my Fitbit on and I track my sleep every night. And to give you, good news, my sleep has been 7 hours, 5 minutes for 2020. So I take sleep very seriously. And I think, like you said, data is king. I think we have to track. We have to track our sleep. We have to track our steps. We have to track our physical activity. We have to track our heart rate. And we will be talking about tracking different parameters as we go in this life. But I think when it comes down to sleep, 7 hours with a good quality is very important. Not just 7 hours in bed, because 7 hours in bed with a sleep apnea without a CPAP mask is as bad as not sleeping. So I think not just the hours of sleep, but quality of sleep. So that brings my next question, that I seen your Facebook post, your YouTube post, that you had come out with the concept of a longevity 101. So what are your things which you include in Longevity 101? What are the things we all should be following if you want to live up to 100?
So with the educational components, I think the first thing is to educate people what's possible. So I start there with saying, yeah, I can easily teach people how to get 10 more years. On average, that's a very realistic goal, and it will have nothing to do with your genetics. So there's some basic elements around that's, and those 10 extra years aren't on the end, that's 10 more healthy years, right? Which is really what we're talking about. And then the next part is we have to understand that our future, in terms of our generation, is going to be different than any generation before us. We tend to rely on past history and assume we're going to have an experience like our parents. That's what I hear everyone say when they come in and start my course. We are in tremendous change, both in terms of the number of support systems around us. There are more support networks out there, but most of us have far fewer children to support us in older age than what happened in previous generations. So that will be very different for people in many ways. And then I'd say in the 101 course, without getting into the details of it, the mission I have is help people to start asking better questions. Everybody figures it out. The problem is most figure it out too late to do anything about it. And so that's the key, right? Is the more we can learn early, the better question we'll start to ask earlier, and we'll have more time to make adjustments rather than have to do the big rescue, the 911 call, all the things that nobody wants to have happen. If we can start to nudge ourselves in a healthier direction, those are really the elements. And say in 101, we're really doing the high level elements of what are the aspects of mind that matter. Attitude, humility is huge. I run into this, and I'll say more often with men, but not exclusively. Ego gets in our way of making good choices. Reality is we were raised with a lot of bad information, not necessarily anyone's fault, raised in an atmosphere of a lot of marketing that convinced us of a lot of things that we now know in the medical community are just untrue, and they actually cause harm. In the environment piece, there's the elements of just understanding what are those environmental toxins out there that we can't see, smell, touch, taste, that absolutely have an impact on our cellular stress in terms of oxidative stress. Diet, which we touched on there in terms of whole food, plant-based, and all the things that go with a healthy diet. We talk about exercise in terms of what would be the elements of an exercise program. Frequency and variety are number one. I don't care so much about what you do. I just care that you do it, and you can change as you go through. There's no magic exercise other than, I would say, if you like to dance, boy, that would be the one to pursue, because if there's one common exercise we see in longevity, it's people who dance. And the reasons for that are both physical, but also cognitive awareness in terms of moving in 3 dimensions in balance, timing, and with someone else. There's nothing more demanding on our body without being overtaxing and overstressing us. And then that last one would be to understand what the role of community, how do you build a tribe around you? Chances are we may not have the tribe that's the best for us. So how do we start to recognize where are the opportunities and where are the threats around that? So those are really the 5 key elements that we talk about. And once you understand, they all, like you mentioned earlier, everything affects everything else. Every one thing you do here helps 3 or 4 things elsewhere. That's why I try to encourage people, don't try to be an expert in any one thing, because you will do so at the expense of some other things. So I'll kind of pick on veganism for a moment. Obviously, it's important and it's healthy, but if that's all your focus is, and you get all stressed out around trying to preach everybody about why all the damage that everyone else is doing, you're not really helping your health as much as you could be. So that's just an example of, we just need to approach things in balance.
I think excellent points. I think I'm starting to understand from you that as an individual, knowledge is power, data is king. I think I sincerely believe that all of us, if you want to be healthy, if you want to live long, if you want to see your great grandkids' graduation, we need to start educating ourselves on a daily basis. And education, fortunately, is very readily available. A lot of great books, a lot of great YouTube videos, a lot of courses, like your course. So I think every individual, if they take even effort to spend 15 to 30 minutes per day in their own health education, not only they will save a lot of money in doctor's visits and procedures, but they will also save a lot of suffering, and they will be able to enjoy their everyday life until they're 80, 90, 100 years old. So education is the key thing. Also, like you said, creating a tribe, creating a family environment where every family member is motivating each other how to be healthy, better health next day. So I think creating a tribe is going to be very important, having your own friends. And I think the most important thing is going to be understanding that even if you are dealt with quote unquote the bad genes, actually it's in your hand how you can modify, how you can turn off some of those bad genes. And I think that's where my next question is to you is, what is the role of genes and what is called epigenome and epigenetics?
Sure. So that's a great example of the things that we were told um, for many years was it's all in our genes. And I will ask people this all the time, and they will say, well, my parents lived to whenever and their parents lived to whenever, so I'm going to live to that same age. Um, so, so we know now that it's not actually the genes that likely created that. It was more if you lived the exact same lifestyle as they did, which happens if you grew up in the same community and you had very much a similar life, I would expect you would live to a fairly similar age. The problem is that's more around a correlation of data as opposed to causality. So we know now that our genes, which are the things that we inherit from our parents, are the things that determine the color of our eyes, the height, what shape my ears and nose and things are going to be, and how many toes I'm going to have. The So those are the genes that we understand, but only about 15% of that has anything to do with longevity. And even then, we're only talking about after age 95. So forget about genes like until you get to 95, and if that's your goal, then you don't need to worry about it. The epigenome is really the chemistry. So I like to describe the genes are the hardware. So we can think about a computer. The genes are the hardware. If you don't turn that computer on and you don't tell it, you don't give it any software, it's not doing anything. So if we plug the software in, think of the software as being the epigenome. So that's the things that's telling the genes, which are similar to a dip switch or a binary switches in a computer, turning things on and off or expressing certain things from certain genes. That's what the epigenome is. And the epigenome is the thing that reaches out into the world. So that's our interaction. So when I inhale in my house, I'm inhaling air from the house. That's interacting with my epigenome. When I go outside in the outside environment, I'm having a different interaction immediately with my epigenome. And so it's going to interact with my genes somewhat differently. And so as we start to look at that and kind of play it forward, that's really the difference of whether genes get expressed or not, is where the epigenome has been stressed or things have started to break down, which will cause genes to get expressed. A classic example to use for that would be breast cancer for women. Certainly a common disease, unfortunately, but many women will carry that gene with them, but it'll never actually get expressed as breast cancer. So how can that be? So the answer is it's wrapped up so tightly on our histones that it never gets exposed for the outside environment, in terms of the outside environment in our body, to actually start to interact with that gene. So it sits there in a totally passive state. It'll only start to interact when it has an opportunity to interact. And the opportunity happens because of largely our lifestyle interactions. So when we put too much stress on our body, faster than it can repair. So it's a bit of a healing. Body's always healing, but it's also breaking down through all the things that we do, and most of it's natural. But if we start to overload our body, we overtax our epigenome, and then we start to get a breakdown of our chromosomes, which now starts to have genetic mutations start to happen, which is where or where disease typically starts, and that could be any number of chronic diseases. It could be cancer. These are the things that start down this path. So the epigenome is the software. That's the brains. That's the piece that we really want to pay attention to. And again, all the things we talk about in lifestyle, mind, environment, diet, exercise, and community, all those things are interacting with our epigenome, and they're telling our genes what to do. And hopefully it's telling us good things to do. It's not simply that we want our genes to be silent. We need our genes active, but we want to make sure that they're preserved for as long as we can.
Wow, yeah, I think such a great explanation. I think I remember two things actually. One about Dean Ornish when he did his lifestyle research study. He actually showed that there are at least 50 genes. The bad genes were turned off and good genes were turned on, particularly when he did with the prostate cancer. And those changes were seen within a year or so. So I think the power of epigenetics or power of environment or power of our healthy lifestyle or our habits has a tremendous impact on genes. And that again says that genes load the trigger and our habits actually load the gun and our habits pull the trigger. And I think I remember also Dr. Neil Barnard clearly explaining that there are certain genes which are like dictator genes. Like you said, having blue eyes is a dictator gene. If you got that gene, you got blue eyes. But there are other genes which are actually like committee genes where they give recommendations, but they don't dictate. And having a diabetes, having certain cancers, those are like committee genes. They give influence, but those influence can be modified with our lifestyle, with our habits, what we do every day. And that brings to our next important bad habit, and that's about smoking. Obviously, when we talk about longevity, as I understand, smoking, if someone starts age 10, 15, 20, 18, it cuts their life by 10 to 15 years. So what are your views on smoking and how people can avoid smoking, can stop smoking? I know it's a complex subject, but what are your views?
So recently, and I'll share this because it's just so shocking, and that's from Dr. Alan Goldhammer with True North Health, and he made a statement to Rich Roll recently. He said that smoking helps prevent cancer or helps prevent heart disease. Sorry, that's why, and it created quite a shock. And he said because it's more likely that smoking will kill you before the heart disease has a chance to do its work. There's probably nothing we could do more deleterious to our long-term health than smoking. And it's, again, everything in chronic disease, it's this habit that happens day after day after day on their own, really not a big issue. Someone who goes and smokes one cigarette isn't suddenly going to have a shortened life, but one cigarette a day, 5 cigarettes a day, it just starts to shorten and shorten and shorten. So it's even quitting smoking will certainly help, but you'll never match someone who has never smoked. So, and again, from a daily health standpoint, it's going to expose us to other diseases, unfortunately. And maybe kind of coming back to that would say, once you have one chronic disease, the second one comes that much quicker and easier. The third one comes that much quicker and easier again. So it's that once we fall off that health cliff, people think that that's it. No, we have to push that first event out as long as we can. That's really how we're going to maintain our health. We'll get longevity out of it as a bonus. But this notion of we're going to take a pill and everything's going to be good, it's a myth. That's just unfortunately, we would, in the medical community, we would love if that's how it worked. But we're nowhere near that. And so even, you can look at someone who goes in and gets a stent, the same thing. Well, it's not just that one artery that was blocked. That's the one that had the big blockage. It just means that the others aren't blocked quite as bad. And so you're now starting to look for where's the second and third one coming up. So yeah, you would know better than anyone in terms of what that happens in the endothelium, in terms of essentially causes aging of cells, just like all these things. It accelerates aging of cells and it causes dysfunction within the cell. And once that starts to happen, then you're aging quicker and you're exposing yourself to a lot more disease risk.
Yeah, I think as a cardiologist, I see that after age 65, so many patients have more than one chronic disease, like you just explained. I think there are 3 or 4 chronic diseases. There are diabetes, there are hypertension. Many of them have, you know, treated for cancer. Many of them have dementia. Many of them have coronary disease. I mean, there are multiple issues, and they're only 70 years old. And I think the lifespan and health span definitely has reduced because of their lifestyle. That brings the next lifestyle disease, and that's type 2 diabetes. As I understand, once a person develops type 2 diabetes, unless they reverse it completely with the lifestyle changes, they actually cut down the life by about 10 years, as much as a smoking does. So again, diabetes, another pandemic, epidemic. So what are your views on type 2 diabetes?
Yeah, and I'm certainly no expert on diabetes, but but what I would say about it is absolutely right. If you don't get it under control, you've essentially given up 10 years of life. But it also means those are going to be difficult years between when you get the diagnosis and end of life. And if you know anything about diabetes, there are some very unfortunate consequences go with it. It's not simply taking pills and managing your blood sugars. It's often associated with the same things that it's common to have both diabetes and heart disease. Probably more common to have both than to only have one and not the other. You just haven't been diagnosed yet, is probably what the case is, or it's just a question of time. So it's the diabetes, with overweight and obesity, like this is. I look at it and say there's a trend happening here, and we're getting a separation within the population. And going forward, to say things will be different. It won't be how much money you have. Health will define wealth, because it's clear that we're in a divergent path here. There are obviously some who get it, and once they get onto it, they realize within whatever, if they commit to lifestyle changes, it's usually within about 90 days. It's like it's not possible to reverse it, because they've experienced it firsthand. Like this was real, like and they start to feel so good, and it just becomes so exciting for them. And it's like the smoker who quit smoking, who suddenly wants everybody to quit smoking because they've seen the light. But it's very real. So yeah, it's something that we want to be proactive. So things like when we get blood work done, like I just love like C-reactive protein. Not many primary care physicians prescribe that, but if I would say that's one thing when you're coming up for your physical, and if you're due for one, go get it and get your blood work done, and make sure that C-reactive protein is on there. That's what I love about that one, is it's the great fortune teller of what's coming down the pipe long before any of us will have any indication in terms of physical indication or awareness.
Yeah, I think I agree with you about C-reactive protein. I mean, chronic inflammation, low-level chronic inflammation has been now, implemented into like heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, a lot of cancers, a lot of issues. So chronic inflammation, and you can easily measure by just checking either CRP or hsCRP, which is very specific for the heart. And I think I agree with you. I think we all have a potential and a possibility to prevent a lot of these chronic diseases. And I think it's all in our hand. I mean, it's what we can do, and just making a day-to-day habit. And that brings to a next question. And that question is about measuring a telomere length. I actually was bold enough to send out my blood to measure my telomere length last year. I'm 58 years old now. And I was happy when my results came back. My biologic age was 41. So I was very happy. And I know 10 years ago, my biologic age was probably 65 or 70. So in the last 4 years, I definitely have reversed some of my biologic age. So what are your views? I know telomere length is probably about $80 or $90 test, but is this something worth for people just as a curiosity, just to get a measure where they stand, or just to get as a motivator that if their biologic age is much more advanced than their chronologic age, maybe they get a wake-up call that I need to reverse my biologic age. So what is your views on telomere length?
Well, my views on data are always yes. more is better because it tells you things. Either it's supporting that good behavior, saying, wow, I'm doing some good things right. Everybody likes getting a gold star or an A on a report. So that's reaffirming for people. And again, if you get it done early, then it says, oh, well, that's, it's not good news, but the response is typically going to be, well, then I guess I better do something about it. After all, I was surprised by it, but now I know I can change it, right? So, and that's what we're talking about. All these things is that you absolutely can change it. I've been having a tremendous amount of fun this year getting blood work done. I'll try to write it up at some point. I've had a wonderful time trying to move numbers around and see how much I can influence, and it's amazing how we can influence these things. So. So generally, yeah. So telomere length is one, and so people don't know. So telomeres are the end of our chromosomes. They're like the plastic on the ends of our laces. They get shorter every time cells replicate, which is part of the natural process. But again, it goes back to that lifespan thing. Our cells are only designed to replicate so many times, and then the idea is the telomeres are done. You're out of telomeres. Well, we can actually start to regrow telomeres largely. Meditation, again, something costs nothing. Nothing restores telomeres better than meditation. Healthy diet, again, keeping our oxidative stress low. There are other things. So that was really, telomere length was one of the first things that happened around biological age, and that started to stimulate a lot of other work. Most of it now has been focused more around DNA methylation and phenotyping of bloods, and so that's what we focus on, is things that you can do in your blood work that'll actually give a more complex view of, and take a number of parameters into play. But yeah, it's all great science. There's nothing.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think data is king again, and I'm going to go through certain things which I have made a list, and I'm going to ask you to add to that list. But that brings the next important question, that we have a lot of communities in the world, including in America, where people are living 100, they're living healthy, they're living happy, they're active, they're going to their church, they're going to their temple, they're still driving, they're literally having fun in their life. And those areas are the blue zones. So please tell us about those blue zones and what are some of the characteristics we can mimic from those blue zones.
So yeah, so there's five formal or acknowledged blue zones in the world, and that comes out of a National Geographic funded program back in 2005. So there's Okinawa, Japan, Icaria, Greece, Sardinia in Italy, Nicoya, Puerto Rico, and Loma Linda, California. So all of them live somewhat different lifestyles, but mostly they live the same lifestyle. And so what I'm saying there is, if you step back and don't overanalyze it, and I've done this and put all the diets together and say, if I average those out, it says, yes, some will eat more fish if they're obviously an island based. That would be natural. That's part of their diet. Some may eat some lamb, for example. There's the common themes of them are, they are tribes. They live simple lives. They've never been exposed to a lot of technology because they tend to be more remote. I'll use Loma Linda as an exception there, obviously. So they largely whole food, plant-based. They eat a lot of beans, a lot of greens in their diet. That's very common. A lot of grains, far more fiber than the American diet. So when we talk about whole food, plant-based, we wanted to pick one thing. I would pick fiber. Fiber is the fixer. It fixes a lot of things for us. The other is again that tribe element we keep coming back to, and it really is, we're learning, like you and I learn from each other every day, right? So if you're in a community of people who are all trying to learn and advance in the same way in terms of quality of life, you're naturally going to do better. So we see that very strong community ties with them, and they tend to be more multi-generational living, which is in America is starting to find its way back towards the pendulum is swinging the other way now, partly because of some people living longer, but and that's generally a good thing. So those are generally the common themes. I'll just make one add-on here. I haven't published it yet, but I've got an article I'm going to put out that talks about Loma Linda, California in particular, but references other blue zones as well, as how they have managed through COVID. And it is a wonderful story. I just, in terms of the data that I was able to pull out of it, it's an exciting story. How could one community that has a lot of older people in it in Loma Linda, 50 miles east of Los Angeles, who has the highest death rate in COVID currently in California, how can these two communities in the same geography, and one's theoretically disadvantaged with all these old people, be thriving while Los Angeles is struggling? So it speaks to the resilience of these people. And I can tell you lots of people over the age of 100 have had COVID, just as an example, and even hospitalized and came back out and are doing really well. So there's things that they've done to build their resilience up all along through their lifetime. It's not simply they got lucky genes. Now, yeah, they got some good genes, no question, but it's more around how do you build resilience, and that means that helps all of us in everyday life.
Yeah, that's excellent. When I saw your slide you posted on your group, which we'll talk about it, about Loma Linda and COVID mortality, and I think they were very impressive data. So I think we look forward to you, publishing and showing us that data. And I think I also have come across a site. I think it's called realage.com. I think it's still the same site. I think where actually a person can plug in some of the simple parameters, including, blood pressure and certain other things, and they can actually guess their biologic age. So I ask all our viewers and our listeners to try that website and see what their biologic or functional age is. And that brings my next topic or next question is that what are some of the parameters we can measure as a health and as a predicting the longevity? And I have made a list, and I'm going to read out the list, and then maybe you can add to the list. One obviously is the body mass index, like how obese we are, how overweight we are, what is our body fat percent, what is our fasting insulin level, what is our fasting glucose, what are our cholesterol levels, what are our triglycerides, what is our A1C, which is a measure of diabetes, what is our white blood cell count, what are our liver enzymes, what is our body temperature. Like you measure your Vmax all the time. What is our Vmax? What is our coronary calcium score? What is our blood pressure? How well we do in our mini mental exam? How is our carotid intimal medial thickness? What is our neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio? What is our telomere length? What is our fiber intake, like you said? How much vegetables, fruits, and beans we take? How much red meat we eat? How much processed meat we eat? How much salt we take? How much sugar intake we have? What are we up to date on vaccines? Are we up to date on colonoscopy? Are we up to date on mammograms? How many average steps we do per day? How much weight training we do, and how many hours we sleep? I mean, this list probably has a lot more things, but I quickly made a list. I also ask you that, I mean, do you think this list and many more things with this list is important for us to track? Like, I almost feel like we all have obligation to sit down once a week on a weekend and sit down half an hour with this list and see where we stand in this list. What are your views on that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the individual choices, right? I think it's always important to meet people where they are, and everybody's at a different place. You and I are used to being in the world of data. That can get overwhelming for people. I probably start with what would be the one thing that's why I kind of mentioned a C-reactive protein. It's not a common one, but it's that canary in the coal mine that's an indicator, is why I like it, because it doesn't tell you what disease is going on or diseases are slowly kind of manifesting. So things like, if I would look at it at a short list initially that will then drive people to look at it more. So I think, whether it's the carotid intimal thickness test, or you get a CT heart scan, coronary artery calcium score, one of those two I think would be a good one just to check where you are. You don't need to do it with any frequency. That first one, I tell you, if you're age 50, these are some things you should get done, because by then you will already be tracking. If you have a propensity to plaque, you will know by age 50. But hopefully, or if you're 40, like those are good milestones to take in. And I think the other easy one, BMI kind of gets a bad rap, and it's the one we're all used to using. Another alternative to that is simply the height to weight ratio. So the idea there is around your waist, your height to waist. You want your waist to be no more than half of your height. So that's an easy one that anyone can do. No calculation really. That's about the simplest math you can do. So that's a good indication, and it's around your belly button, and not necessarily where your belt is. So those to me are the ones. The other one I like to see done at least once. You only really need to get it done. Would be your Lp(a). So looking for that ultra fine lipids within, because LDL is just a classification of lipids, right? It's not a lipid. So it's the ultra fine and that's generally, it's going to be inherited. You won't know if you've had it or not. If you do have it, you'd want to know that early. Finding out late in the game is probably not. So that's a one-time score. You can get genetic testing to find out your, again, what's your risk of heart disease relative to others. It's generally not that much different than others. So I wouldn't necessarily say that one is nearly as critical as getting some of the other tests. And then it's what I focus on is building the habits, right, and that support those numbers that you're talking about. So got to start somewhere. So those where I kind of say, let's get some data, and then we'll build on it over time. Because I think that's always the risk is people can easily get overwhelmed with all the. You and I deal with it every day, so it's not a it's just like, well, and that's why I talk about people. When you go into the doctor, like if you don't have the numbers, like you're not going to know anything. Like, tell me what you've done for the last 12 months. No, right? You don't have time to do that. Certainly, most doctors don't. So yeah, those are all great markers. I think.
I think I like the CRP, which you clearly said that. I like lipoprotein A. I like the calcium scoring, which is easier, quicker. I think carotid intimal thickness is not that widely available because it requires a lot more expertise than the calcium scoring. I think having a body height to waist ratio is a very simple thing. Anybody can do it at home. I mean, all those things are simple, and I think, like you said, if you know those data, then you know where you stand. And I think once you know where you stand, there's a better motivation. I mean, I know many of my patients, when I tell them that the LDL, the bad cholesterol, was 200, and now it's 130 with diet and exercise. I mean, they get motivated to bring it down even more. I mean, they get almost like they get a kick out of it that the diet has worked. So I think data definitely helps to keep us motivated. So, that brings a very important question, is that many people, unfortunately, when they're in the 60s and 70s, they start to think that life is over. They are dealt with certain disease. They're going to essentially die soon from those disease. I sincerely believe that not only that's not the right way to think, but actually that's very depressing to think. I sincerely believe that even at age 70, 80, we all have chance and opportunity to reverse many of the chronic disease and live again very long life. So what are your views in terms of thinking that now I'm old and there's nothing left for me to do? I mean, I think that's a wrong approach to take. And how would you advise the people when they start thinking like that?
Yeah, as you talked about that, I'll give one, I think, a really good example. I had a student in one of my classes. I'm not sure what his age was. He was probably late 70s. And I remember one of the class I talk about heart disease, give everybody a grounding on what is it and what causes it, and what can you do about it. And I remember he asked some questions in that class around, he says, my cardiologist isn't telling me any of this stuff. I said, well, I don't know who your cardiologist, obviously. And most cardiologists, their waiting room is full of patients and they just don't have, they're putting band-aids on things all day long, and that's that's their world, and I don't criticize them for that at all. They're doing what's needed, but fast forward, I think about a year later, I got a note from him, which was just a lovely note around how much he had learned around things that he could reverse. And he said, I haven't felt this good in years. So he's, say, late 70s and still able to change his life that much in a very real sense. And it was, these are the things that, if you know someone who's been through it, it will inspire you. But the stories of these people, it's amazing. So it's really, if you feel that way, like I see people who I know are toxic, right? It shows in their personality that they're toxic. It shows in their conversation. And oftentimes it's not the individual, it's the toxins within them that they have been exposing themselves to. And so what you see happen when people go through this is they truly change personality, and they come out the other end significantly different, and they come out with a lot more hope, right? Because you're talking about people who have lost hope, they've lost will, and it just all seems overwhelming. You say longevity is easy, living healthy is easy. It's getting rid of the old habits that's the work. And so education helps give you the motivation of why I need to change, what the opportunity is, and this is how to do it. So yeah, it's the earlier you do it, the more good years you're going to have, obviously. But if you're 75 and you think it's too late, I would say you're giving some real value away. You're underestimating your potential.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think, I was 55, 56 when I started reversing some of my chronic disease, including prediabetes, snoring and sleep apnea, hypertension, high cholesterol. So I think any age it can be done. I think 75, 80, I've seen a lot of patients examples who have reversed the diabetes. They have got rid of their angina with, they get it with heart blockage and chest pains. So I think it's reversible. And many times, some of the patients actually get surprised that the reversible is actually in 3 to 6 months. I mean, they don't have to wait years and years. In 3 months, they can be a new person. And I think the joy they get from reversing, the kick they get out of it by spending more time with the family, going out and, going out for a dance, like you said, when all those things are, so much more joy than just sitting at home and just slowly dying. I think, that brings the next important questions. A lot of people obviously want to live long. They want to take care of health, but there is more than health when we are living long, because health is a one type of success, but there are other successes in the life which are important too. Because if we are very healthy, but if we are financially broke, that's not going to work. If we are very healthy, but all our family members and friends are dead, that's not going to be a lot of fun. So what are your views on some of the non-health parameters and attributes when it comes down to life? Because I think, to me, all those things are going to be as important. Like in our pillars, when we look at my screen, my background, I put 20 pillars of healthy lifestyle, because it's not just the 6 pillars of the health, but it's about our career, about parenting. All other pillars are very important also. So what are your views as we get older, as we increase our longevity? What else is important other than just the health?
So one of them is our investment plan in health. So like we would tell our children, invest early, right? And that will grow and it'll compound over time. So that requires in terms of health is have a plan. I say have a realistic plan of what your future can look like, working towards some end goal. Because as soon as you have a plan, it's like a trip. As soon as you have a destination in mind and you say, well, we're going to do some stop at some spots on the way, it changes our perspective on life, and it's really helpful. And also means that if we run into some obstacle that we weren't expecting, we do have a plan in place, and we're going to adjust the plan, as opposed to suddenly what else can go wrong, which if you don't have a plan, suddenly everything seems much bigger. I part of what I teach is about aging in place, and And one of the key components there is understanding your financial planning. For a lot of people, it is imperative that they're able to stay in their home for as long as they can. So what have you done to be able to prepare that? So that's part of the work that I do as well for consulting for people online is what are the aspects you need to make some changes in your home early so you can get some nice attractive upgrades that work better for you and will work for a number of years. Those, for example, just from a financial standpoint, typically will have about a 6-month payback. And when I say 6-month payback, relative to if you had to leave your home 6 months earlier, whatever number of years down the road. So it's one of the best investments that you can make, I think. And as you start to kind of get this together, and you start to adopt these principles that you and I are talking about, it starts to open the way to discover purpose. And there's nothing more frustrating and disappointing in later years than to feel like you don't have purpose. And there are lots of reasons why that can happen at any point in life. But often it's the weight and all the baggage that we carry with us that keeps us from seeing the opportunities that are in front of us. So it's the things like simplifying our lives. So if finances are an issue, then make it a non-issue and simplify your life and get into a situation that is affordable. And that may mean some other housing arrangement that's earlier living with family, living with some co-housing arrangements. There are lots of ways to change what we're doing today to make tomorrow a better and rosier outlook for us. So there's any number of things, but it's generally just don't sit still. I think the biggest thing I see is, particularly in the aging spaces, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing until we can't. And unfortunately, I can tell you how that's going to work out in terms of probably 95% of the time, and it's not going to be the way you want. You may be one of the 5% who gets lucky, and that's great. So we really want to have some plans, and once you start to do that, then we'll naturally start to address some of these other issues. Our relationships will get stronger as a result because we're dealing with less stress. The classic example I like to give on this one is nobody gets excited about doing a will. We know it's important. We kind of put it off, but eventually we go do it, and guaranteed in the car driving home, there's this weight's been lifted off us. We know now that this is taken care of, and that's a big relief for us. Well, that's only one bag that we're all carrying. There's a number of them that we don't even realize until we shed them. And so that's what I'm kind of getting at. As soon as we start to plan it out, you'll naturally start to find these things, say, yeah, let's deal with, once you deal with one or two, then everything else, like getting the baggage and decluttering the house. Like I see some people who are just, I mean, it is sad to see all the clutter they live with. Like, get organized, clean up your life, and it'll uplift your world. So there's any number of things that go beyond just the direct application of health.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think as we get older, health obviously is number one important, but at the same time, like you said, financial health, having a relationship, having friends, having our housing arrangement, having downsizing certain of the clutters in the life, downsizing our house, even having one car instead of two cars. When all those things are going to be very important as we get older, because as we get older, I think some of the responsibilities we have will need to be cut down. We may not have the physical or mental abilities to do that. And I think all those things are going to require smart planning. And that's where I think open discussion with friends, learning from YouTube, and I think learning from books, all those things are going to be very important. I think tonight's live, is another addition to for the people, should we start thinking? And I think that brings my next question. And that's that question to everybody, particularly answer with many of my old patients want. And that's like, what kind of devices they should own? Like you showed us your Garmin device. I have a Fitbit right here. And what other devices a person should own, even if they get older, to keep track how healthy they are and how well off they are?
Yeah, so you and I have those. The Apple Watch that does some of these things too. The Polar is another company who has some of these devices. Another one is, it's a ring. It's called Aura, That slips on, that has some benefits. Those are I think the most popular ones that are out there. They may seem like a lot of money, but you could easily spend $300 on these devices. But if you like data and you find it helps you, motivate you, it will be a great investment, because it will save you a lot more money than it will cost, and it'll give you some goals to reach for. In the world of devices, the things that are positive are, they give you positive feedback, and real-time feedback are always going to be appealing. There are many other devices out there now. These are more in later life, the things like the fall devices that are intended to be wearables. People typically don't wear them because there's nothing, they're not getting any positive reinforcement from them. They're intended to serve an important purpose, but at the end of the day, people wear things that give them positive feedback. And I don't mean as in they'd make everything positive. Bad news is bad news. So I could use a great example. A colleague asked me about resting heart rate. Well, I don't know if you know what your resting heart rate, I mean, I know you do, but just how important and what an indicator something as simple as that is, and to suddenly have an elevated heart rate and know it is a great piece of information to find out, that's going to cause you to probably, I hope, pick up the phone and call it and get in to see your physician, because that's clearly an indication of something serious going on with your heart. So it's the old, you don't know what you're going to learn until you start to do it. And I think it's hard to go wrong with any of those. The technology today and these things like that, it's a diode, that LED diode that looks at my blood vessels in my wrist, and it can measure oxygen levels in my blood. It's measuring the pulse. It's amazing what, and you don't need to use them all, and you don't need to figure them all out on day one. I certainly didn't. It's been, but it's been interesting. I went as a data guy when I used to do Ironman training. I had data on all sorts of things. And after I retired from that life, I would run naked. And when I say run naked, I really wasn't running naked through the neighborhood. I was with no electronics. I didn't care. I went out and ran until as long as I felt like running, no watches, didn't care what the pace was, and it was very freeing. But I'll tell you, it was sure nice to have some data to lean back on this year when I started to look at some things. So a little data is good, and if it makes you thrive and gets you excited, more data is there for you too.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think fortunately, Fitbit, which actually makes a device which is only $69, very accurate. It can measure your steps, it can measure your resting heart rate, it can measure your heart rate during exercise, it can measure your sleep. And $69 is not that expensive to track all this tremendous data. And other device I also highly recommend to all my patients is a simple blood pressure machine. The blood pressure machines now, the automatic ones with the regular arm cuff, they are at Walmart, there are many pharmacy, they're like $45. And I think that can be definitely a great way to make sure that your blood pressure is running normal, because hypertension or the high blood pressure is 50% of Americans have it. And 50% of those people who have high blood pressure, it's not controlled. So until you measure your blood pressure at home, you will never know whether it's controlled or not. So there are a lot of devices I think one can learn from, one can Google it, but definitely having a Fitbit or a Garmin type device or Apple Watch and having a blood pressure machine at home would be very important. If somebody is diabetic, obviously having a glucometer at home to check their fasting blood sugar in the morning would be very important.
So, I'll add in there if I can. A blood pressure monitor, I'm glad you raised that up, is an absolute, everyone should have that, because everyone can use it. It's nothing unique to one person, which is good. And I'll give you a great example of, I take mine regularly. Don't take it every day, but I take it certainly every week. And I know same time of day, every day, and I know very close what my numbers will be. So last week I was in to get some testing, and it was a fairly big event. And my blood pressure, I had never seen it that high. So I knew I was having white coat syndrome. I had all this anxiety around me, and we got doing the test, and it came right back down to, once I get active and I get moving, life is good, and I'm happy when I'm moving. And so if that's your only, that's the danger, right? If you only get it done under an anxious moment, you're going to be worrying about something that really isn't an issue at all. So you might as well do it at home and you're relaxed and do a bunch of them. And then again, you'll find out what reality is, and you'll probably feel a lot better about it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you. So, my next question is about your work. So please tell us that what course do you offer in longevity, and can people sign up online, and how can they follow your Facebook page, and what things you contribute to this longevity?
Sure. So we haven't posted the courses live yet, but what I would suggest to people do, if they want to go to longevityadvantage.com, so it's all one word, longevityadvantage.com, you'll find a place there that you can sign up. We get a newsletter out once a quarter or so, once a month if we're really active. So it's not a lot of email going out into people's inboxes. And that way you'll get to know, and you'll get an advance offer when we get the courses available online. So you'll get in at the lowest rate. We have a Facebook page as well, Longevity Advantage on Facebook. We have a Facebook group, which I know you're part of, AJ, and that's a Longevity Advantage group. And the other I would suggest is, you mentioned as well, is on YouTube. I try to do interviews with some frequency. I've been derelict in the last number of weeks. I've been overwhelmed with things, but I try to get some really interesting people in, doctors, inspiring people, all of the kind of elements around longevity that people can take home and hopefully get entertained by some interesting people and learn something. So that's Longevity Advantage on YouTube as well.
That's great. No, I think, Scott, thank you very much. I think we all follow your guidance, your advice. I think you've been a leader in this field, and you actually not just talk about it, you follow it yourself. I've seen your post in terms of your VMAX, in terms of your exercise programs, in terms of your bike. And I think that's a key thing. I think we cannot just talk about it. We have to do it ourselves. And I think many physicians, unfortunately, make bad patients themselves. And I think they are not following some of the healthy lifestyle themselves. And how can they motivate their patients? So I think we need leaders like you. And we'll continue working together for next 30, 40, 50 years. And I wish you the best. And thanks for coming on our page. Thank you.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend time with you again, AJ, and I'm just thrilled that you've committed to take this choice that you have. It's a bold move, and it's just I think it's so exciting, and I'm happy to play any small part in it that you think I can do. So,
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.